Welcome to OutWithDan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Hello and welcome back to Out with Dan. Today I am so very excited to talk to John Copenhaver, Robyn, Gigl, and Herren about the new anthology Crime Inc. Welcome.
Thank you, Dan. For having us.
It's my pleasure. So I am so excited to talk about this. You know, lots of us write short stories, but I don't think I've ever seen an anthology that is 100% LGBTQ plus. Maybe I have, but I'm not sure I have. So John, as the editor, you want to give us an idea of why this came to you? What was the impetus behind it?
Sure. So in 2023, Jeff Marks, who is my fellow co-organizer at Queer Crime Writers, did a study where he looked at the anthologies in the crime writing community, that were sort of verified anthologies by MWA, and then did a count to see queer representation among the authors. And he found that in 517 stories, there's a less than 1% representation. So this is, pretty wildly, skewed in terms of where we should be with the number of queer crime writers working today. And so we published that, and just as an organization to bring people's awareness. And the primary goal was to get more queer authors into mainstream anthologies. But Salem West of Bywater Books reached out to me after seeing this statistic and said, "Hey, John, what do you think about actually pulling together an anthology of queer crime fiction?" And she said, "Look, it's like our goal is to be, of course, get in these other anthologies, but this is a great way of, focusing attention on the great writing happening among many of the queer crime writers that have been writing for a long time, and those of us who are writing, more recently, and offer the world this and show, the great variety and how dynamic all these stories are." So I said, absolutely, sign me up. I was a little daunted. I never edited an anthology before, but it was great. I mean, it was just, it just fed my soul during a pretty dark time, in the world. And so I can't, I'm very thankful to have been asked to do that and have this position.
Well, I'm thankful Salem came up to you with that, because it really is so wonderful. There's an enormous collection of authors in this anthology, all different types of voices, and that's always exciting. And Robyn and Greg gave us short stories that left me wanting to know more about the characters. It's, every time you read a story, I think sometimes when I get to the end, you see the period and the author is excited because they have finished their baby and they're putting their baby out into the world. But as a reader, the most exciting thing is to be left with a longing to know more about these characters. Robyn, you want to give a little setup of what your short story is about?
Sure. And the idea behind the anthology was to pick an icon in the LGBTQ plus community. And they didn't have to be the focal point of the story, but they just had to figure in the story in some way. And as a trans woman, one of my icons, I'm also an older trans woman, so I'm giving my age away, but one of my icons was Christine Jorgensen. So that was the icon that I picked. But the story is not about Christine. It's a murder mystery in short story form. And I can't give away too much, but it's about the investigation of a trans person who was not out to anyone, who was a law enforcement officer. And so it's the story that really talks a little bit about what it's like to be trans, what it's like to try to hide who we are, and at the same time trying to solve the crime. So.
Well, and I think one of the things that I was really left with a bit of a sadness in the fact that, as an author, you point out that Christine Jorgensen was celebrated. And this was 60, 70 years ago. And yet
73, Dan, to be exact.
All right,
December 1st, 1952, which is the date of the Daily News headline.
But I think that what I was left with was that feeling that, jeepers, in 1952, we celebrated Christine, and yet there's so many people out there who are trying to silence trans lives, LGBTQ plus lives. And that's the reason this anthology is important right now. It's important for us to stand up and say, you know what? Pardon my language, but fuck off. We're not going anywhere. We've always been here and we're going to stay. And if you don't like it, we don't care, because we're not going to hide just because that's what you want. And
that was the point of the story, Dan, in many ways, is that how times have changed, how every trans person in this country now has a target on their back. And it doesn't matter who you are, what you look like. If you're trans, you're at risk.
Yes, absolutely. And that's sad, but I celebrate the fact that your voice is out there in the world to be heard. So thank you, Robyn.
No, thank you, Dan.
So Greg, tell a little bit about your story. I'll tell the audience that before we started recording, I asked Greg if his protagonist had a name. He's referred to as Major Daddy, which was so fun to me. But Greg said the name is under wraps. So now take it away, Greg.
Well, my story was, I actually wrote it originally. Well, the idea behind the story, I wrote about the table at the restaurant, the Tennessee Williams table at the restaurant, in a short story a long time ago that I never did anything with. It was called Tennessee's Table. It was the name of the story. And I'm also writing, I also don't write one thing at a time. I write lots of things at the same time. And so I have a book in progress that I had included a scene with the Major Daddy and the other character having lunch somewhere. And when I got asked to do this, I was not feeling particularly creative. So I just went and pulled that chapter out of the story, out of the manuscript, and then just revised it and moved it around a little bit and made it longer, because it wasn't very long to begin with. And I have a working name for him, but I don't think I'm going to use it, because physically he's based on a friend of mine, and that's who I think of when I think of the character. And I have to change that, because it's not, they're nothing alike except the way they look. So, and that's pretty much it, I suppose. I was very excited to be a part of this. And it's always fun to have a trial run for something you're working, a longer project. Sorry, my cat is attacking me. And so sorry. And so I don't remember what I was saying before I started being attacked. So we can move on.
That's all right. Well, so one thing that you did in your story, Greg, which I did enjoy, was I grew up, most everybody that I've talked to knows that I grew up in a fairly religious environment growing up. It has informed who I am as an adult, both positively and maybe negatively. And one of the things that your Major Daddy has is he refers to his puritanical upbringing and the fact that he had been a cop before. And I think that, we do sometimes have to deprogram ourselves or reprogram ourselves from the way those voices that we heard growing up or how we grew up. And it informs who we are at this point in our life. And I did enjoy the fact that that was woven so seamlessly in there, that it was just part of it.
Well, that's really what the point of the book, should I ever finish it, actually is that he was brought up in a very right-wing evangelical background, working class background, went into the military immediately out of high school and served for 20 years. So he's never really been able to be himself. And so he left the military. I don't know if I included this in the story, but It said in 1994.
Yeah.
And so he was in the military. He was a military cop. And so he found out that his name was on a list before Don't Ask, Don't Tell went into effect.
Yeah.
And he was going to get purged. So he put in for retirement and got out. And now he's moved to New Orleans and he's trying to figure out how to be gay in his 40s.
I think that, a place like New Orleans is sort of like New York, maybe Los Angeles as well, where it attracts people who want to be out. That, no offense, John, but I don't think everybody thinks I'll move to Richmond when I come out. even though I spent a lot of time in Richmond when I was in college. So I love
a weird place right now, but I agree. Like certainly when I was coming out of college, I would not have thought of Richmond.
I don't think it's the top #1 city, but it's a gorgeous city. So it's and a lot of fun as well. So, John, how is being an editor different than being just a writer? Even that you have a short story in this anthology as well, but how was the editing hat to wear?
It was actually it was great because I got to have a kind of conversation with every single one of these writers through their stories, and that was really exciting for me. Everyone in this collection are writers that I admire, and then I kind of get to participate a little bit in their creative process, which, I'm giving feedback, but I'm also learning a lot. And I'm getting a real sense of like all the different voices and how we do tend to come at the same things, but from very different angles. So the anthology has this, it's unified, of course, as Robyn mentioned, by every story having an icon that it gets a reference or it gets an Easter egg, or in some cases, actually the icon walks on stage. But so there is a sort of unity there, but really all these writers are coming at it from different angles. And I thought it was just a lot of fun to participate in all that, to see the differences, but also how there's like a thread through it as well,
yes.
A thematic thread through it. And so it was just a joy. It was definitely a different hat. Like it's not the same as when you're creating something. I got to take all the material and kind of shape it a little bit and find kind of a rhythm to the order and that there's definitely creative elements to it, but it is different. But kind of a wonderful difference. It's nice.
That's a nice thing. So how so this is something I've always wanted to ask editors. How big is the struggle in trying to figure out the order?
Yeah, what was interesting, what I did is I did short, like little synopses of all the stories. So, because I just wanted to get a bird's eye view. Like it's hard to hold all that in your head.
Yeah.
I mean, I've spent time with it. And so I really needed to get a bird's eye view. And then I started looking in the synopses for themes and resonances. So, you can't it doesn't work out that there's just a nice little shape to it. But stories are positioned besides stories that they have some resonance with. There's sort of a cluster of Southern related stories. There is a cluster of, some crime procedurals and noirs but it's not, everything kind of echoes everything else all the way through it. And a couple of things I knew is I really want to start with a punch, an emotional gut punch, because I want to wake people up.
Yes.
And then kind of weave through, but then in a sort of more positive, affirmative place. So the collection does that in terms of the stories that are received. They are dark. It is crime fiction, but it try to sort of modulate the choices and darkness.
Yeah, I did notice it wasn't quite romance this time.
Not quite romance, no.
Dan, if I could just jump in, and not that John needs a pat on the back, but I had never written a short story before, and John obviously, was wonderful to work with in terms of helping me shape it. I've written novels, never a short story. So I want to give kudos to John in terms of helping me out and helping to shape the story, because he was great to work with.
Oh, that's nice.
You wouldn't know it that you never written a short story before. So just saying.
Well, and I think, as I said earlier, both Robyn and Greg gave us a story that I can certainly see it continuing. So Greg's is part of a longer work. And Robyn, I think yours could be part of a longer work too. I mean, I keep going, both of you, because it was really, really fun.
Well, unlike Greg, I don't have the the structure in place already. So, right now this is just the standalone, and I'm working on another book. So I don't know if Max Kirby will see a book length treatment, but who knows?
Yeah,
that's right. I can only hope, Robyn. What can I tell you? So it's So John, you want to list out some of the other authors who are involved in this?
Sure. I mean, we have like 36 authors, and more than I can hold in my head. But there everyone from Renee James, another wonderful trans crime writer, to luminaries like Catherine B. Forrest, up and comers like Margot Deweyhe and Katrina Carrasco. Marco Caracari, Dave Pedersen, I think Krista Foss, launches us off with the emotional punch, and Cheryl Head, Penny Mickleberry, and on and on and on. I know I'm forgetting some, but I don't want to drone on.
Well, no, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but and one of the things is there were some of the authors included that I'm like, I'm Facebook friends with, and I didn't really know anything about them other than Facebook, and so it was sort of nice to put a writing voice with a person that you see on Facebook, which I know is so childish, but my life may be driven by Facebook some days, or I try to drive Facebook. Maybe that's the way I should put it. So it's exciting. This new book, Crime Inc., is out today. It's available everywhere you get your finest of books. I thank you guys very much for being here.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you.
And I look forward to seeing each of you soon.
Absolutely, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at OutWithDan.com, on Twitter at OutWithDan, and on Instagram and Facebook at GoOutWithDan. This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.